So, how are you? Yes. When people ask me that question these days, I usually respond with something like, well, apart from the obvious, I'm okay. Meaning my personal circumstances are, for now, okay, but I'm not really that okay. Yeah, I'm feeling fear and despair, confusion, anger, a whole lot of what we call the difficult emotions. Difficult not because they're wrong or they shouldn't be there, but difficult to hold and hold ourselves as we experience them. And so I really want to acknowledge, and I was going to say honor our feelings, but I just want to say acknowledge what we are experiencing individually and in our communities and collectively. And just acknowledging that it's tough right now. It's tough to be sensitive and aware in this world. And acknowledging also that, yes, it has always been tough, and that this is what we get to practice with. This is one of the hardest things about being a human, that no matter how much ease and well-being any of us is experiencing, or even joy, that there are so many of us in the world in the same moment experiencing pain and deprivation, injustice, cruelty. This is how it is for us. This is how it was for the Buddha. And this is how it was for our ancestors, those of the spirit and those of the blood, those who survived and those who didn't. And now it's our turn. So how do we inhabit this moment? How do we hold our feelings? How do we support and hold each other? And specifically, I want to talk about how the quality and practice of compassion can be a refuge and a resource. And so really, this is a talk in response to cruelty. Cruelty is nothing new, and many of us have felt it directly from supposed loved ones, from enemies, from the state, and it's becoming more and more vivid. It's coming out of the shadows. The masks, the veneer, the lip service of kindness and fairness, justice, even the rule of law is slipping, is dissolving in some ways. And that is really intense and disorienting. And we're feeling it. And we're needing to respond and not always sure of how, mostly not sure of how. How do we respond as individuals, as communities? This came up in our board meeting last week. How do we respond as a community? What are the sentiments of our community? What are the values of our community? So last week, as I came into the Friday Metta group that I offer Fridays at 4:30, I was feeling really disheartened, especially about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and Andre Hernandez Romero, and all the unnamed people that they represent. And I think a lot of other folks were feeling that too. And I noticed that when the news of the week is particularly upsetting, that more people show up to practice on Fridays, to take refuge in community and to resource ourselves and to stay sensitive. It's a difficult time to be sensitive without support. And sensitivity is part of our Dharma practice. We are not practicing to be invincible, unfeeling, stoic. We're practicing to stop and to look with clear and tender eyes. Numbing, distracting, emotionally flattening, these are strategies that the energies of greed, hatred, and delusion employ to disempower us and separate us from our hearts and each other. Sometimes it's easier to numb than to face what's here if we don't have the tools for staying present. So how do we stay awake in times like this? So I want to offer thoughts and practices around the energy of compassion, karuna in the Pali language, the language of the Buddha's teachings. And starting with compassion for our own pain and unease. Pain is pain, and holding all pain with compassion is the only wise response. Sometimes we might have a sense of their pain is so much worse, or it's selfish of me to think of my own pain. When we do that, it has the effect of being a bypass. And when we numb to our own difficult emotions, it reinforces numbing as a response to others. We are worthy of our compassion, and practicing compassion for ourselves connects us to the experience of others. So last summer, David and Sean and I took a trip in August to escape the heat a little bit. And we got to go to some places that I never thought I'd visit in my life. And one of the places was Lithuania. And in this town called Klaipėda, where we stopped, one of the tourist attractions in the old town on a street corner was a bronze mouse, and it was about this high. And so the mouse had great big ears. And of course, to interact with the sculpture, you were meant to kneel down and whisper in one of those big metal ears whatever it was you most wished for. And something about the whole thing, the cuteness of it, the sweetness of it, awakened, for me, what I think of as the child heart. And so I kneeled, the undefended heart. And so I kneeled down to whisper in the mouse's ear, and I really didn't even know what I was going to say. And then I heard the words come out of my mouth, I just want everyone to be happy. I just want everyone to be happy. So that's what I whispered. And it felt real and it felt naive. And I wonder how many of us would have whispered something similar. I'm pretty sure most people, when they kneel down and whisper in that mouse's ear, are wishing for good or their concept of good. For me, it felt like, this child within speaking, making this simple wish, but also with the knowing that there's a lot of unhappiness in the world and a certain fatigue at holding that for so long, and a recognition of that almost naive wish against the backdrop of human history and the pain that we live with. And so that's a question for me. Is it naive to have that kind of compassion? Because that's actually the kind of wish that the Buddha taught in the Metta Sutta, in his teachings on the energies of the heart. And this is one of the most famous teachings of the Buddha. And I want to read part of it. And this is a translation by Bhante Buddharakkhita, who's a Ugandan monk. Let them cultivate the thought, may all be well and secure. May all beings be happy. There it is. Whatever living creatures there be, without exception, weak or strong, long, huge, or middle-sized, or short, minute, or bulky, whether visible or invisible, and those living far or near, the born and those seeking birth, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive or decry anyone anywhere. Let none wish others harm in resentment or in hate. Just as with her own life, a mother shields from hurt her child, her only child. Let all embracing thoughts for all beings be yours. Cultivate an all-embracing mind of love for all throughout the universe, in all its height, depth, and breadth, love that is untroubled and beyond hatred or enmity. And if you want to read those words again, just Google the Metta Sutta, M-E-T-T-A. So what is the response to cruelty? How does my Dharma practice hold the heart that at its core is saying, I just want everyone to be happy with the realities of what we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis? And so at the metta practice, A week ago, I brought in compassion because in the scheme of the Brahma Viharas being the divine abidings of the heart, compassion or karuna sits at the opposite of cruelty. If cruelty takes joy in the misfortune of others, particularly those that we don't like, then compassion or karuna acknowledges the pain and misfortune of others and ourselves with caring, with tenderness. It's the energy of the heart that witnesses, that cares, and which leads to appropriate action in the world. And we'll talk about appropriate action in a minute. And I want to spend a little time thinking about this energy, this form of love that takes the form of caring. So when I teach the Friday group on metta, I often describe the four Brahma Viharas like this. First, there's metta, love or loving kindness. So this is what we understand as unconditional love, freely, universally offered. And when the heart that's suffused with the energy of metta encounters suffering in the world, it manifests as karuna, the compassion that we've been talking about. And when it meets happiness, well-being, joy in the world, it manifests as mudita, appreciative joy, joy, taking joy in joy. And then these three energies are supported, and I actually see them as interwoven, like on a support of upekkha or equanimity, balance, the aspect of love that is wise and resilient and able to hold the truth of pain and suffering in the world, and is not attached to outcomes, but responds to this moment right here from a place of balance. And I see the Buddha offering this teaching to help us understand the qualities and capacities of the awakening heart, the undefended heart, the whole heart. So it's interesting to notice our own relationship to the word compassion. You know, does that word work for you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Depending on our background and life experiences and perhaps our sensitivity to hypocrisy in our lives, that word compassion may be rich and full, or it might feel hollow and overused and insincere. And so spending a moment with the word itself and feeling our way into what's helpful for us. Maybe we don't want to use that word. In English, compassion has the sense of suffering with, a kind of resonance that's born of empathy, of really witnessing. And so it's helpful for me when I think of suffering with, to think of the word suffering in terms of enduring, bearing, holding, present to. And in the teachings, there are really two words that are used to define compassion. One is karuna, which we've been talking about. That's like the meditative compassion, the compassion that we feel in our practice or in our prayers. And the other is anukampa, which has the sense of resonating. It's translated sometimes as trembling or quivering, and I like the word quickening, which is expressed in action. And it's never pity, you know, which if cruelty is the far enemy of compassion, pity is the near enemy of compassion. And I like this way of feeling into compassion as the quickening of the heart that cares. And so for me, I like to really simplify it and just use the word caring. Caring for the experience of others, caring for the environment, caring for the world, caring for myself and my own experience, because caring encompasses thought and action. So a heart that's awake or in the process of awakening is essential to our practice. And the energy of caring or compassion is essential to keeping the heart awake and alive. It's possible to be attracted to meditation as a sort of escape or a way of repressing strong feelings. And if that is happening for us, that's okay. We can have compassion for that need to learn how to hold what's difficult. This is practice. This isn't demonstrating perfection. The practice is really learning about how to see, to know, and hold what's difficult with clarity, with tenderness, with wisdom. This is what lessens suffering and pain in our experience, because the practice is really about learning to stay with that experience, to know it deeply, to know dukkha, know suffering and the causes of suffering and the release from suffering. So the energies of greed, hatred, and delusion, the agents of tyranny, feed on numbness. They feed on confusion. They feed on bypass. And so when we pay attention with care, we are really doing something to resist their pull and their influence. So Joseph Goldstein, in his book Mindfulness, wrote, "Compassion is the antidote to this great destructive power. Compassion is the strong wish of the mind and heart to alleviate all suffering. It opens our hearts to the suffering that is there, and it overcomes our indifference. It is the strong and deep feeling that is moved to act. As Thich Nhat Hanh so aptly put it, compassion is a verb." And it was this very feeling that motivated the Bodhisattva on his long journey to Buddhahood. In our times, the Dalai Lama is an inspiring exemplar of this ennobling mind state. He expressed the challenge for us very clearly. Compassion and love are precious things in life. They are not complicated. They are simple, but difficult to practice. So a boundless, compassionate heart is a foundation of our spiritual practice, essential to it, and essential to just being a human in this world and not closing down. It's essential to our life practice, that anukampa practice of being in the world and of use in the world and responding appropriately to suffering in the world. And the Eightfold Path asks us to be compassionate in our thinking and compassionate in our actions, to cause as little harm as possible and to alleviate the effects of harm as we're able to. And that can take a lot of different forms. Practices like offering metta and karuna to all beings as an energy of the heart, or as prayer, if that resonates for you. Or showing up to protests, which is compassion in action, because you let those most targeted see that you care. You join others so that together we see that we aren't alone, and we signal to those causing harm that their actions are seen and known and resisted. Rising up and saying no can be a very compassionate action. Or our compassion might be really local, like caring for a neighbor who needs help getting around town or unloading their groceries. Or it might be taking that grand bodhisattva vow to practice for the benefit of all beings for eternity. Or it might be you think about people in peril, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia and Andrew Hernandez Romero, and you give money to people who are working legal channels to free them. Compassion in action doesn't have to look or show up a certain way. In fact, it can arise organically in our practice of karuna or meditative compassion. You might choose to sit with, bear with the pain of another or another community, and to really, really feel that wish as you do. May you be free from this pain. May you be free from this suffering. And you stay with that and let the intention for anukampa, compassion and action, arise organically from that to create the seedbed for what's appropriate, what's the non-harming response that I can take in this moment, and then to do it So Christina Feldman writes in Boundless Heart, which is a book all about the Brahma Viharas, moments of unhesitating compassion, whether offered or received, leave a deep imprint on our hearts. They give us a glimpse into a world that is not defined by I and you, self and other, but a world where all living beings are joined in the longing to be free from harm, to be well, and to be cared for. The Buddha speaks of the possibility of immeasurable compassion dedicated to the end of all suffering, and equally speaks of compassion as a path of cultivation. It is the primary aspiration of a spiritual life, the path of understanding and liberation taught by not only the Buddha, but by all great teachers. It's not concerned with personal improvement or gain, but with teaching us how to care. And just shifting gears a little bit right now, what about having compassion for those who don't merit it or don't seem to merit it? So the Dalai Lama tells the story of a Tibetan monk who was imprisoned by the Chinese government and abused and tortured and held for many years. And he shared with the Dalai Lama the story of those years of pain. And the Dalai Lama asked him, was there ever a moment when you felt your life was truly in danger? And the monk replied, the most dangerous moments were when I felt myself beginning to lose compassion for my jailers. The most dangerous moments were when I felt myself beginning to lose compassion for my jailers. So that monk valued his capacity for compassion in the same way that he valued his life. It's so hard to imagine that level of practice. I can't imagine that that is how I would feel if I were unjustly imprisoned for a day, let alone decades. I have trouble being compassionate for people who cut me off in traffic, and people who aren't directly harming me, but whose views I think are harming others. And I have a friend that I've known for about 12 years, and I used to experience her as a really kind and loving person. Like just deeply, someone who seemed to have a finely honed sense of ethics, compassion for animals, love of community, gentle spirit, spiritual seeker. And we've grown apart from COVID and other things over the last few years. And now I sometimes see things that she posts on social media that are uncompassionate, even cruel, expressions of non-caring that kind of just take my breath away. And you may have people like this in your life as well. And I've been thinking about how I want to respond, or even if I do want to respond. And for a few months, I felt this anger, like I wanted to lecture her, or I wanted her to feel the impacts of her views, or I wanted to cut her out of my life in a way that would hurt somehow. That motivation, being more punishing than loving. And the anger is about compassion on some level. When we see someone inflicting harm or cheering on others inflicting harm, or even complacent as they witness harm, yes, anger is very likely to show up. It's very often alerting us to injustice, to unethical behavior, to harm being done. We feel compassion for the victims. That's the part that comes easy. And it's really hard to feel compassion for those causing and supporting harm. And it can take a lot of our energy that could be used helping and feeling into ways of supporting others. And so if I didn't know this person, I might have just dismissed them. But because I did know the person and I had seen the good in them, I really had to think about it. And when I really sat with it a bit, and I saw my own punishing attitudes and began to let them go a bit, I honestly felt something else arise. And it surprised me because it was compassion for her, and specifically compassion for her lack of compassion. The worst thing for that monk in the Dalai Lama's story would be to lose his compassion. And here was my friend living with a lot of privilege, seemingly tossing hers away like it was an old worn out shoe. And realizing that she too was or is suffering in some way, from the delusions of the algorithms, from fear, from hatred. And at that point, I felt clear. I saw myself sitting with her and just saying from the heart, "Are you okay? I'm really worried for you. I'm worried you're losing your connection to your heart. I'm worried that you're losing your capacity to care deeply for others. I'm worried that you're losing the most precious thing that you have." And that's the place where I can feel compassion for her. And we can ask ourselves, am I entirely free of the energies that they are gripped by? Do I never hate? Do I never fear? Am I never greedy? Am I always generous? Do I always seek to understand? So our practice of compassion is to hold all beings in the heart, aware that no one is outside of suffering and pain, and to water the seeds of caring in ourselves and in others. And recognizing that this is the work of our lives, not just this week. We're going to be at this a long time, depending on how you look at it, maybe lifetimes. And not holding this alone, but in common with, letting a compassionate heart be both a refuge and a launching pad. To meditate on where our heart is moved and let the intended action arise freely from that contemplation and then be acted on. To know that our appropriate response to whatever is here can and will take many forms. And so importantly, that equanimity part, letting go of outcome. And this is where the vow of the Bodhisattva can be a support. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Suffering is endless. I vow to put a stop to it. We just keep showing up. How do I end something that is endless? It's an orientation, not a destination. It's a way of letting go of outcome. And so is that vow to end the endless, to save the numberless, is it naive? Or is it a skillful means of letting go of outcome and staying with faith? Compassion fatigue is real if we don't care for ourselves along the way or we feel alone. It's not the feeling of compassion that weakens and drains us. Compassion fatigue is very real when we close our hearts, when we resist the truth, when we allow ourselves to be numbed and ignore what is really present in our hearts. That's what's truly exhausting. The effort, the conscious or unconscious effort to push away. And so, is it naive? Is it naive to care? Is it naive to kneel down and whisper in the mouse's ear, I just want everyone to be happy, and really mean it? Is the Metta Sutta naive? Is it naive to share the Bodhisattva vow? So Sean shared with me a TED Talk by Gia Bastida, who's a young Mexican, Chilean, indigenous woman who's a climate activist and leader. And beautiful, beautiful talk. And she spoke about the world that she imagines for the future and what it is that keeps her moving forward. A world that's balanced and healthy and connected. And she closed her talk by saying, I've been called naive many, many times. And I think the naivety is to keep going in the way that we are and thinking we'll be okay. So that's our invitation to never stop imagining a future that is filled with love. So let's just take a moment. Thank you for listening, and just taking a moment to allow the words and thoughts to settle. And feeling compassion, care for however your heart is in this moment. It takes courage to move in the direction of peace. And I just want to invite you sometime this week, if you'd like to, just doing the compassion practice that I outlined. Just sitting with awareness, being with the suffering of someone or community, really standing by and offering compassion, caring, the wish that that suffering might be eased, that it might be healed, that they might be free. And really doing that for like 5 minutes or so. And then coming back to your breath and seeing what arises. Is there an intention that spontaneously arises from that being with? And if there is, may I act on it? Well, thank you. And well, we have a few minutes to share thoughts, what's alive in your heart, observations or ways that maybe you work with compassion that you'd like to share. And I just want to say upfront, I need to leave a few minutes at the end for a couple of announcements that I forgot to give earlier. So just to say that. And yeah, so anyone in the room or online have something you'd like to share? And to close, I'd like to have us offer this blessing together, and I'm going to call it up on screen to share. Oh, and if you don't have one, Sean might have some extras. So just raise your hand if you need one. And I'm gonna share that with the folks online. I have it all ready to do today. There we go. And then just offering this from your heart, going forth into this world so in need of light. May I bring all the kindness and wisdom I embody to each being and each situation that I meet. May the power of my practice today strengthen my resolve to be an agent of peace and justice in this world. Going forth together into this world so in need of light, may we together bring all the kindness and wisdom we embody to each being and each situation that we meet. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. We dedicate our practice for the liberation of all beings, the great, the small, the wise, the ignorant, the powerful, and the powerless. May all beings be liberated from sorrow and loss, hatred and injustice, scarcity and want, and every form of suffering. May our practice today be a prayer for peace, and may it benefit all beings without exception. Thank you all, and see you next week, if not before. And yeah.